Ladies and gentlemen, HAI President Matt Zuccaro.
Well, thank you very much, and I'm sure I'll get a bunch of calls from elected officials shortly about the noise. I really appreciate you joining us this morning. As you know, each year we like to have the opportunity for our members and attendees at the show interface with the president, CEOs of the various general aviation associations. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate these ladies and gentlemen coming down and joining us. In essence, they're like everybody else, very busy schedules running around, but they have faithfully supported this endeavor, and I really appreciate it. We also have the event to be recorded, and it'll be posted up on our website, for viewing as well. What I'd like to do is start off by introducing the panel. Melissa Ruttinger is the Senior Vice President for Government Affairs at AOPA. Jack Pelt is the President of Experimental Aircraft Association, the famous Oshkosh Air Show, which I love. Pete Bunce, GAMA, President. Greg Principato is NASAO. Tom Hendricks is NATA. And of course, Ed Bowen from NBAA. So you, in essence, have a who's who of the general aviation organizations. And I think the thing that you should take to heart is that the cooperative effort that we have among us and the relationships that have developed over the years that we've each been doing our jobs has really benefited you, the members in the industry, quite a bit. I don't think it's any mystery that working together, which we do all the time, we are much more effective in influencing regulations, legislation, and cultural changes and philosophical viewpoints within the industry. And that has proven to be a winning formula, and it's been my pleasure and honor to work with all these people over the last several years. What we'd like to do is I'd like to start out and have each one of the panel members describe the current status of their organization so that we really have a good feeling as to what each organization is doing and what kind of resources they have and major activities. So if we might do that, just give a synopsis of what the status of the organization is right now in the structure. So, Melissa?
Thank you, Matt. It's great to be here. I apologize in advance if my voice is a little hoarse. I'm getting over a cold. So AOPA, we have a set of priorities for 2015, some legislative and regulatory priorities that we're really excited about, that we're getting some movement on. Certainly one that you all are aware of is ADS-B out and the 2020 mandate, and so there's a lot of activity around that right now. Unmanned aerial systems, avgas, unleaded avgas, and medical reform are kind of the top issues for AOPA, as well as obviously airport advocacy. On the other side of the non-legislative side of AOPA, we have a very robust year for our membership organization. In addition to 6 fly-ins that AOPA is hosting around the country for our members, we always have a big presence at AirVenture, at Oshkosh, as well as Sun and Fun, and so we're really excited that we're going to be in every state, in every part of the country, pretty much all year long, doing outreach to our members. And so we're really excited to be here and look forward to some discussion.
Thank you. Jack?
All right. Well, again, good morning, and thanks, Matt, for inviting us again this year to your expo. It's always a very interesting time for us to watch the helicopter industry growth. I know last year at Anaheim, seeing it take another step, and then again this year in Florida, and then it'll be interesting to see what happens in Kentucky. That'll be a nice new location. Well, for EA, a lot of you think of us as the 1 week a year activity from an association standpoint, where everybody comes to Oshkosh for AirVenture, and it's a time for the entire general aviation community in all aspects, whether it be helicopters or fixed wing or the military, the vintage, the aerobatic guys, to show up and show what's new relative to innovation and what's going on from a commerce standpoint in general aviation. But we do spend 51 weeks a year working on our association activity, which is comprised of 900 chapters around the country of people at local airports that are really engaged and involved in trying to create aviation enthusiasts. And our focus this year is to see how we can grow that group of chapters across the United States and use that as a foundation to bring young people into aviation. This year we're going to be reaching a significant milestone in flying our 2 millionth Young Eagle. And that's a program where these volunteers out across the country take their time in their airplane, and they have rallies at the airport and invite young people to come out and experience their first flight in an airplane. And that can be, we have a lot of great stories of where it can be a very life-changing event that causes a person, at a young age to get involved in aviation and take that up as a career path. And we're trying this year to put more what we call pathways, of ways of taking those folks, and when they've kind of identified they have an interest, see if we can help provide the educational pathways for them to either become a pilot, to get involved in A&P school, to go get their engineering degree, or pursue any aspect of aviation that will be hopefully helpful over the years to come to keep that robust pool of talent that the industry needs. We're working with all the other associations on a lot of big issues this year from an advocacy standpoint. Melissa certainly mentioned a lot of the ones that are very important to us. The Pilot's Bill of Rights 2 that I think we're going to discuss a little later during the day, that's a critical piece of legislation that is fundamental and common sense around pilot advocacy, and along with a medical petition to eliminate the need to have a third-class medical for many types of flying. Keeping airports open, working on the 100 low lead fuel replacement, and a lot of other things that we work collaboratively. And then the FAA reauthorization, which is going to occur in September of this year, which is important. But probably our number one topic we talk about at our board is aviation safety. And we follow a lot of what's going on with HAI on that focus. And I think, Matt, your association's done a great job of making that front and center when I pick up and look at the emails and the various literature you put out, that safety is very important. And we in GA have the same concern with the fixed wing crowd. We have to do a better job of showing the NTSB and the FAA that we're making the necessary improvements by getting the necessary safety enhancements and pilot awareness into our communities, because that is the way we get viewed by the public, is how safe are you. I'll quit talking, and I'm sure, Pete, there's other things on safety from the rewrite and things that are going on that
absolutely, Jack, and just want to echo your words, Matt. This is just a tremendous convention, and congratulations to you and your staff. The energy as I walked around the floor yesterday, and the anticipation on Monday with all the OEMs, some nice announcements out there of some big deals, but what a great convention, so congrats.
Thank you.
From the manufacturer standpoint, as we approach this year, obviously our concerns are primarily with our customers. How are our customers going to be able to maintain the aircraft that they have, both on the fixed and the rotor wing side, and also where are they going to buy new? If you looked at the numbers that we let forth about 2 weeks ago, the overall rotorcraft industry was down about 25% from 2013. Turbine was down less than piston. There's some remanufacturing processes going into effect. Obviously, we know Robinson has shifted a lot toward the turbine. Enstrom has been basically, they were down to go and re-outfit the plant. If you haven't been and seen their new facility that's up there in northern Michigan, you ought to go take a stop up there. It's really impressive. So we were coming off in the rotorcraft industry a very strong year in 2013, but I think if you just look out there and talk to all of the OEMs, there's a very positive feeling of what's happening in the industry, positive energy going forward. Some concerns about what's happening in the energy sector with the fact that oil is down significantly, and also all the troubles that we have in Russia and the Middle East right now. That is something that everybody is watching out there. But the other part of it is that there's important parts of this world that are just waking up to the utility of general aviation and rotorcraft specifically. If you travel around China or you're in India, new construction projects often have, when you're talking about a public facility like a hospital, or you're talking in a new office building, and has a heliport associated with it. And so I think there is a recognition that not only for disaster response and aeromedical evac, but also just basic transportation in very congested urban areas throughout the planet right now, that rotorcraft become very essential. And so it's our job as a global association to be able to go and try to work with regulators to be able to set the conditions where we can allow the industry to grow. That obviously is not just focused beyond our shores, because as Jack mentioned, reauthorization coming up has great impact on us. And we've got all kinds of things that we have to work together as a unified industry. You know, whether we're talking noise, whether over in urban areas, or how the federal government intends to regulate noise over national parks, the introduction of UASs into the airspace. As Melissa said, the introduction of ADS-B, the manufacturers are working very hard to be able to bring offerings, and now it's very good to be able to see that the market is working the way the market does work, where the 2020, the mandate that's coming forward has produced products that will be out on the shelf, if not now, but very soon. We have another major manufacturer that will announce in the next couple weeks their price. And if you look at a comparison of when the conversion was made to Mode C, and you take what it cost at that time compared to what it is now, you can outfit with ADS-B at half the cost of what it cost when we outfitted with Mode C. So the market is working, it's bringing down costs. We do have concerns that if people wait until the mandate, right up to the edge of the mandate in 2019, that the industrial capacity on the installation centers and repair stations are going to be such that the price will start to rise. But the other thing that we are working with the FAA on, along with our sister associations, is to be able to allow for the installation of this equipment, in many cases by an A&P or in the amateur built category, to be able to allow the owner-operator to be able to install them, and Jack's organization is working hard on that. So I think there's a lot of energy behind that, but we all have to recognize that as our airspace becomes more crowded and the UASs start to populate, this tidal wave's coming. We know we aren't going to be able to stop it, but we've got to do it smartly. We've got to be able to have a capability where we can see them electronically, and we also have to make sure that the FAA sees us responding in a unified form as to what kind of regulations make sense to keep us safe and keep us from hitting these machines that are proliferating rapidly out there. So I think I'll stop there, Matt.
Great.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you and the Helicopter Association International for having me here. And I have to say that was the coolest start of a session I've ever seen. I love that. That was really cool. My name is Greg Principato. I'm president of the National Association of State Aviation Officials. And even though I might have the whitest hair up here on this panel, I guess I'm the junior member of the panel in terms of service in the general aviation community. Much of my career had been on the commercial or policy side, and so maybe talk about some of those observations that I've gathered over the years. But it's an honor to be up here with my friends and colleagues on this panel. Our members are the aviation departments in each of the states that oversee obviously the aviation program. Very different programs in different states. In Alaska, Hawaii, they run dozens, even in the case of Alaska, hundreds of airports. In some states, I know Matt and I are going to get into this in a little bit, they only have a couple of staff people, and that means totally different things for each of the states. Our organization's in a bit of a time of transition. As I said, this is my 4th month. Many of you knew my predecessor, my very good friend Henry Ogrodzinski, who had run NSAO for about 20 years and who passed away a year ago. And so we're in the middle of an organizational transition, looking at doing some things a little bit differently, trying to raise our profile a little bit. Probably our biggest issues right now are in 3 buckets. Reauthorization, obviously, is a big one right now. We just had our Washington conference last week and had a lot of participation in that. And our main concern in the reauthorization front, and this has been mentioned already by a couple of my colleagues up here, is making sure that the money that is supposed to be invested in our nation's airports gets spent. We obviously want every airport to be a safe place to land. We feel like the way the program is set up now, particularly on the non-primary entitlement side, is maybe not as efficient as it could be, and we'd like to have more of a role for the states to be involved in making sure those dollars get spent and get put in those airports to keep all those airports open and safe and available for everyone's use. Those will be our main focus on the reauthorization side. Another issue that we are following very closely, a very hot one for our members, is the FAA guidance last year, the clarification on the use of aviation, the sales tax on aviation fuel going to aviation purposes. Obviously, all of our members feel very strongly that that's where the money should go. They obviously have a certain amount of political pressure they might be getting from further up the food chain, from governors or others who might want it to be used for something else. But our main role in working with the FAA, the clarification left a lot of questions unanswered, and we're working through that with them to get those questions answered so those funds can remain in the aviation system and be invested in aviation for the benefit of the aviation community. And the third big issue that we're really looking at is UAS. You've already heard a lot about that up here. I have to say, Pete Bunce to my right here, 3 or 4 years ago, we were on a committee together, Next Gen committee together, and you were really pushing us to really move more fully on those issues 3 or 4 years ago, and probably a lot of people would have been better off if they listened to you a little bit more back then. I have to congratulate you for that. And the technology and everything else is just moving so fast. Our members are very interested in this. There are 35 or 36 states where UAS legislation is passed, and it's, in more cases than not a very constructive thing. I was talking to someone from a middle Atlantic state the other day, and their legislature wants to pass a law because some constituent was afraid that a drone would come over. You know, they all call them drones in the state legislature. A drone come over and take a picture of somebody in their house or something, and those are the kind of political pressures that lead to bad legislation on the state level. We want to work with our members, with all of my colleagues up here and others to try to make sense of that and get good laws and good regulations put into place. A couple of weeks ago, I was on a panel similar to this at the Michigan Airports Conference, mostly on reauthorization. We had a nice crowd and very engaged. The next panel was on UAS. The room was packed to overflowing, and that panel could have gone on the rest of the day, I think. A lot of interest in that and what it means, and all the questions that have been left unanswered by the proposed rule, and all the other developments that might be coming up that will affect us all. So those really are 3 issues. I look forward to engaging with my colleagues over the next hour and a half on those, and turn it over to Tom.
Thanks, Greg. Matt, again, appreciate the welcome back here. It's good to be at HAI again, and it's good to see such a robust show once again, so congratulations on that. NATA, as many of you know, represent businesses at airports that provide aeronautical services. So the fixed base operators, charter operators, flight schools, maintenance repair stations, fuel providers. It's really a broad array of aviation businesses. We have about 2,300 members. So when we go to meet policymakers in Washington, we emphasize the business aspects of our membership out there. Primarily, it's small businesses, although, as you all are aware, we're seeing a lot of consolidation in the FBO industry right now. So like most of the folks on the stage here, we've been up on the Hill the last few weeks briefing both the House and Senate staffs about our priorities for the FAA reauthorization. I'll cover those briefly. I know Matt wants to go in those in a little more detail. And because I have a survival instinct, we went and told the FAA what we told the House and Senate staffs after we met with them. So, but we're focused, again, on business issues. We continue to see challenges in the consistency of regulatory interpretation. We chaired an aviation rulemaking committee 3 years ago that addressed this as a result of the previous reauthorization. But we're still seeing a slowness of the FAA to adapt to meet the needs of our businesses out there. So we'd like to see a date certain on some of the FAA programs out there that are going to address this. In fact, we also offer suggestions in our policy papers about perhaps some reorganization within the FAA Aviation Safety Organization to address this. The aircraft certification branch in the 121 community and others have a very interesting organization. The Transport Aircraft Directorate up in Seattle is kind of a center of knowledge for that segment of the industry. We got the Helicopter Directorate down in Texas that does the same thing. We'd like the FAA to consider reorganizing the Flight Standards Service in a similar fashion so that we can concentrate
subject matter experts in a particular region, and we believe this will help in the regulatory interpretation. Right now, aircraft management companies, pure charter operators want to expand their services to a different region or a different district and have to completely, in some cases, change the way they're doing business. This also impacts maintenance repair facilities as well, as they have to rewrite manuals that have been proven and operating in a particular region to meet the needs of a different region. The FAA knows this is a challenge. We want to work with them on this, but consistency for businesses is very important out there, and predictability, that's going to be a major issue for us. The National Resource Program is also impacting small businesses specifically. We've got small charter operators with 4 or 5 airplanes that will add a new type of aircraft, maybe even a Cirrus, to their fleet. And the airplane's sitting on the ground for months waiting for an FAA line check airman to come out and certify their pilots, when we have designees available to provide that service out there. There's still a reluctance by some small businesses to raise the flag up to headquarters because of the perception of retribution. We raised this with Peggy Gilligan last week. She's frustrated by it. She wants the word to get up to headquarters when this occurs. But when there are resources available, we can't have business coming to a full stop waiting for an FAA line check pilot to come out and provide a service. We'd like to see an increased emphasis on safety programs in our community. We're seeing very good success with ASAP programs. Our Air Charter Safety Foundation is now engaged in ASAP activity in 4 FAA regions. The Great Lakes region was really drove this initial capability, and we're seeing that take off in other regions as well. But as we build this up for the air charter industry and for some flight departments, we need to make sure that we strengthen our protections of that voluntary data and information that flight crew members and others are providing. And so that's a big initiative for us. And finally, we've got a couple of tax issues that are very inside baseball Washington, but federal excise tax on aircraft management agreements are huge. As Ed will tell you, and Pete, depreciation is very important. We've had a short-term fix that ended December 31st. We need to enact in a more permanent fashion. And we're still paying fuel fraud tax. We still have this fuel fraud provision where a large portion of jet fuel that's purchased out there, the taxes are going straight to the Highway Trust Fund and not to the Aviation Trust Fund. So we've called for a General Accountability Office study of this so we can understand how big that challenge is and then follow on with some legislation. So a lot going on. I know Matt's going to ask us to expand on a couple of these. We appreciate the welcome very much. It's great to be here.
Ed?
All right, Matt. Well, thank you. Ed Bolin with the National Business Aviation Association. And Matt, you asked us to comment on the strength of our industry. Clearly, the strength of HAI is clear and evident walking around on the exhibit floor and getting the sense of what's going on here. It's pretty impressive, and I want to congratulate you and your team for what is another just spectacular show. You know, I think the business aviation industry in the United States is probably stronger now than it has been in many years. As we've gone around at our conferences this year, at our regional forums, talking to people, it's clear that people are flying more. Fuel sales are up. The inventory of used airplanes is down. Prices are beginning to stabilize. And I think what we're seeing is that, as has historically been the case, our industry is following the economy. And the U.S. economy right now is probably as strong as it has been since the Great Recession. And so that's good news for us. You know, for a number of years, we were looking outside the United States for growth and stability, and now we're seeing it in the United States, which is without a doubt the largest business aviation market in the world. So, you know, we've kind of gone through a very difficult time. We're slowly building out. It feels better now than it has felt. But obviously, you are always looking what else is out there. What are the risks to what we are perceiving today? And there's a lot of hot spots around the world, and you're as aware as I am about what's happening in Russia, happening in the Middle East, changes in policy in China. So all of that is out there, but at the heart of it, this year is an FAA reauthorization year. The authority of the FAA is going to sunset on September 30th, which means that Congress will need to be involved at providing future FAA authority. And we know that with that FAA reauthorization process comes a lot of challenges and comes a lot of opportunities. A lot of those things have already been talked about up here. We see it as an opportunity to maybe strengthen our access to airports and airspace. We see it as an opportunity to maybe improve the process, the certification process, get some work done on things like third-class medicals, make sure we transition to next gen in a way that it is affordable and protects our right to privacy. So we see a lot of opportunity in FAA reauthorization. We also see predictable challenges. As a lot of you know, for the last 20 years, there have been people who have promoted radical change to our air traffic control system in the United States, who have promoted funding that with user fees, basing it on foreign models of operation. Within the general aviation community, historically, we have viewed those as real threats to the future of our industry, and we have been effective at pointing out the strength of our system and ways to improve our system rather than radical change. And that has been based on the fact that our nation's air traffic control system is by far the largest, the most diverse, the most complex, the safest, and the most efficient air traffic control system in the world. And we're reluctant to give up on a system that has worked so well, but we don't want to be complacent about it. We want to make sure that we take the system we have now and we continuously evolve it and improve it and make sure that we're not just the best today, but we're the best 5 years, 10 years, and 50 years from now. And so I think that will be the opportunity that we have as we go through the reauthorization process. I know a lot of people will say, gosh, I thought we've already fought the user fee fight. I thought we fought privatization fights. Didn't we win? Isn't that all behind us? And some of you have heard me say before, you know, those are really bad ideas. And the unfortunate thing about Washington is it's really hard to permanently kill a bad idea. These things will be on the table. They will be part of the debate. And I know from an NBAA perspective, as we go through the FAA reauthorization debate, our priorities will be to protect and to promote business aviation, general aviation's access to airports and to airspace in a predictable and an affordable manner. We believe that those are the key fundamentals as we go forward. Access to airspace, access to airports, predictable and affordable. And that'll be at the heart of every issue. But I just want to make sure that everyone is aware this is a reauthorization year. It does provide extraordinary opportunities for us to do things in a timely fashion to address a lot of concerns, to make our system better. But it will come with threats as well. And I would hope that our community can, as we have been in the past, be informed, be engaged, be coordinated, and work together to promote the best interest of general aviation in the United States.
Thanks, Ed. While we're down that end where you were, I know you have a lot of initiatives and focus on privacy issues. And maybe you can bring us up to date on where that is.
Well, privacy has been a big issue with NBAA and within the community for a very long time. Historically, we were able to protect our right to privacy through the Blocked Aircraft Registration Request Program, or the BAR program. And many of you know that program came under some pressure a couple of years ago. Our community came together. We fought that legally. We fought it legislatively. And ultimately, we were successful. Congress stepped in and recognized that there is a right for an individual and a company to be able to protect their identity as they fly in real time in the airspace. So that is currently the law of the land. We're clearly changing now the technologies that we use. We're moving to ADS-B. NBAA has been supportive of ADS-B as a tool to improve efficiency, to improve capacity. but we have consistently registered our concern about our ability to protect one's identity in real time when flying. And that's an issue that still needs to be addressed. We see some urgency to that. We are working with the FAA, with the Next Gen Advisory Committee, part of the ADSB 2020 mandate working groups, to really make sure that we as a community are aware of what the issue is and find solutions so that we can move forward with Next Gen, we can move forward with the ADSB mandate, but do it in a way that protects what Congress and others have believed is a fundamental need for privacy, for security purposes, for competitive purposes, and because that's the American way.
Thanks. Jack, I know that you've been working on pilot medicals, which is certainly important to our members as well. And I think it would be interesting if we could get a status where that's at.
Yeah, it's been longer than I kind of like to recall as to how far back EA and AOPA went together, putting in a petition for an exemption on the Class 3 medical. And we worked really hard with the other associations on getting the FAA to a place where we thought they were in agreement that they would allow private flying without a Class 3 medical. Driver's license would all be required for various types of aircraft. And the FAA even went as far as to tell us back in July that they had a notice of proposed rulemaking that they were finally got out of inside of the FAA and were going to release to the public for comment. We have yet to see it. We're yet to get to be able to even talk about the specifics of what's in that rulemaking because they won't tell us. It's stuck in DOT. The good news is last year with the last Congress there was a lot of momentum around getting legislation to enact the use of flying without a third-class medical. The new Congress that was put in place in January got right after it, and as part of the Senator Inhofe and Congressman Graves' bill that's called the Pilot's Bill of Rights 2, there's a bill that's in the House and a bill that's in the Senate, it has very specific language in there. Aircraft with a maximum takeoff gross weight of 6,000 pounds, flight level below 14,000 feet, 5 passengers, 250 knots, IFR and VFR. And that's a legislation that has got bipartisan support and actually is gaining a lot of support in both the House and the Senate. And we hope that they'll get that passed before the FAA ever does whatever they're going to do with the NPRM, which my guess is it's still probably, even if they get it out of the Department of Transportation, is end of the year before we'd see a final policy by the FAA. In the meantime, this legislation, if it gets passed, could go into become law immediately. And in that, the way it's written, I think it's 180 days, Melissa, from the time the legislation is approved, you could be flying without a third-class medical.
Yeah.
We don't believe there's a safety issue. We don't believe that there's a health risk. The facts and data from sport pilots say that that's the case. But we think it's crucially important to, one, eliminate the barriers of people saying it's getting too expensive and it's just too big a hassle and there's fewer AMEs to give the physicals, that people are dropping out of the roles of flying, and this will help prevent that. And it gets people into flying on the other side, which we hope will create some enthusiasm to bring the pilot roles back up to a healthier number than we've seen. So nothing but goodness in it, and we encourage everybody through all of our associations to contact your legislated officials. We have methods on our website that makes it very, very easy at EAA.org to get out and get it's a pre-scripted letter that automatically gets sent to your elected officials to encourage them to vote on passing this bill.
Well, it's a great effort and dramatically changed the way pilots look at flying. You're absolutely right. Tom, I know you're interested and focused on the ability for people to have general aviation voluntary reporting capabilities. So love to hear the update on that one.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. It's very important that we continue working with all the associations to help improve our safety performance in general aviation. And one of the keys to that is developing a culture where our crew members feel confident that they can provide voluntary information without retribution. And these Aviation Safety Action Plan programs that are out there now are one mechanism. The second piece of that is our ability to collect very robust data off of aircraft. The ASAP report can tell you why. The FOQA report, Flight Ops Quality Assurance Report, where we extract data from aircraft, can tell you what exactly happened. So those are two very important pieces. We've started down this voluntary reporting path with these ASAP programs for Part 135 and some corporate flight departments. We're starting to see very good results of those activities. The culture is starting to change. We're building trust between the local FAA offices, the employee representatives, and the company representatives. But we've got to accelerate this. In the middle of that, we want to make sure that there's a legislative framework so that that information that our flight crew members provide is protected by law. Right now, there's it is somewhat in Part 193 of the U.S. Code, but we've seen an instance where litigators have been able to pierce that veil. The Comair accident in Lexington, Kentucky several years is one example of that. But we've got to keep driving this change in culture throughout general aviation. The commercial aviation industry has reaped tremendous benefits from this, and we want to drive general aviation in this direction as well. With small GE aircraft, collecting data is going to be more challenging, but with the rapid advance of technologies that's probably in your pocket right now or you're carrying in your briefcase, there may be a way to access this data, but we've got to start down this path of measuring and putting proactive systems in place that prevent a reduction in safety performance. So we're very proud of the work of our Air Charter Safety Foundation in this regard. We've asked for some legislation to ensure that that activity continues forward. It requires the FAA support. We're in the Great Lakes region, the Western Pacific region. We're just rolling out in the Southwest region and the Eastern region. So those are very positive developments that benefit everyone in general aviation and bodes well for our future. Congress needs to be briefed on this. They need to make sure they have the legislative protections in place so that we can take advantage of this and we can all continue our improving safety performance.
Thanks. Pete, as many of the people know, GAMRA and HAI have started down a road to address the issue of Part 27, 29 aircraft certification, and I think it's a pretty exciting initiative, and I know we've had a lot of input and questions from our members, and appreciate it if you could really get us updated on that as to where we're heading.
Sure, Matt. If you look at the cost of new production aircraft on either the fixed wing or the rotorcraft side, so much of that cost is derived through the certification processes. And these development programs, if you think about when you develop a new product, and of course Jack had a lot of experience in his previous life putting new product to market, your burn rate is tremendous as a manufacturer as you go along, and the more unnecessary certification burdens that you put on a manufacturer, the more delay it is to when they can get their product to market and start getting a return on that investment. So the price obviously has to rise. And so we have to, as a nation, and actually as a whole industry, because I think Europe is on board with us there, is we have to find ways to really apply a risk-based approach to the certification of new products. And the thing that I find encouraging is we have an FAA administrator and we have a head of EASA, the director of EASA, both with a firm belief that if you apply a risk-based approach, you can start moving the needle on certifying aircraft and put more effort by the regulatory authorities on newer technology and allow companies that are doing something or processes that they've used multiple times with a great safety record before to be able to just go ahead and do that. And so we started with Part 23. And as you know, if you look at the light end of general aviation below 12,500 pounds, and you look back over the last 10 to 15 years, there's just been a total revolution. Glass cockpit technology was introduced into those aircraft because we had some enlightened people at the FAA. In fact, one of them sitting in this room, I'm Kim Smith, I'm going to point out, is back here, who worked at the Small Aircraft Directorate and said, hey, if we keep requiring 10 to the -9th safety for general aviation, we're going to just make the products too expensive and nobody will buy them and we can't move the safety needle. So why don't we go and kind of have a different standard based on how many people are on board the aircraft and some other criteria, and start to look at what we can do with new technology. And then all of a sudden we introduce TAWs and glass cockpits, and now controlled flight into terrain is down there almost in the unmeasurable category on the fixed wing side. And we were very fortunate to be able to have Kim then go from the small aircraft directorate in Kansas City down to Fort Worth, where she kind of took that same logic and said, you know, rotorcraft, we haven't adjusted the rules for rotorcraft in over 30 years. Is there a better way to do this? And through this Part 23 process, what we found out is when we got the regulators to sit in the room with the manufacturers and the operators to say, okay, let's look at different means of compliance. We know what the high-level safety rule is. We know what the goal is of what we're trying to achieve, whether you're talking structures or power plant. But if we're too prescriptive and say this is the way you do it, you get to the things like when you do a burn test on certain material for a seat, it's so prescriptive, it even tells you what kind of Bunsen burner you have to buy to be able to do the burn test. That's how prescriptive it got. And there's something wrong with that. So through this Part 23 process, we got the regulators, operators, the manufacturers all together and said, okay, let's look at, this may be one means of compliance, but there may be another one. And everybody started to agree. And all of a sudden the regulators said, this is the process where we really need to go. We need to follow this process. So on the Part 23 side, that's still working its way through the FAA bureaucracy, and quite frankly, when you hit the lawyers and everything there, that becomes a stumbling block. But every single person that we have talked to in the FAA, in the engineering side of the FAA, says this is the way we've got to go. So just as recently as Monday of this week, we had a meeting here with the manufacturers, and we had FAA representatives from the rotorcraft directorate come in and say, we have a unique opportunity that we may not have for the next 2 decades to be able to take what we've learned in the Part 23 process and apply it to Part 27, 29, and really attack this. And we attack it now while people are still fresh with the ideas of how great this 23 process is, and try to apply it to 27, 29. And so I see a great opportunity here. Quite frankly, one of my concerns is that traditionally in the rotorcraft world, the rotorcraft manufacturers have not worked as cooperatively with one another as they have on the fixed wing side. There's a little bit different mindset in the rotorcraft world, and our job as Gamma working with HAI is to try to break down those barriers and make everybody realize that we have an opportunity with the regulators right now on both sides of the Atlantic and regulators around the world to be able to seize this opportunity to be able to look at how we certify product and make change. And that's just not for new production aircraft, because through this process, and we started the process on Part 23 up in Oshkosh with a representative of every single one of these associations participating, and we have been able to do things with aircraft that are currently out there to be able to introduce things like angle of attack indicators. I think the next thing we're going to be able to do is digital engine monitoring, and be able to do it in a very cost-effective way where it helps people retrofit the aircraft that they have, because the burden to certify that product is not so high that we price ourselves right out of the marketplace. So we can move the safety needle if we can get everybody working together. And so our first step is to get with the original equipment manufacturers and say, okay, what do we want to get out of this process change that we know will take at least 7 years to get to the finish line? What do we want to look like when we're in the 2020s as far as being able to manufacture products? So I'm very encouraged that we've got a good start.
Thanks a lot. Melissa, I know that when we look at the flight training environment and new students coming into the pipeline, one of the major problems they have to deal with is a lack of getting financing for the training. And I know you just initiated a very exciting program to hit that head on. And I think it would be a good idea if we could explain that to the audience.
Sure, I'm happy to. So that financing option that we just introduced is part of a broader flight training initiative that AOPA actually started a number of years ago, at least 4 or 5 years ago. And we started by, first of all, everybody here in the industry, there have been programs over the years, Be a Pilot, Learn to Fly, Let's Go Flying, that the industry's partnered on, or AOPA's done some initiatives, other organizations have done initiatives to try and move the needle. The pilot population obviously has slowly been in decline for a number of years. And those programs were great. We got people through the door. The problem is we weren't retaining them. I think we had something like, the industry as a whole has something like a 70% dropout rate. So somebody was interested enough to walk through the door, get their third-class medical, start flying, and they dropped out. And so, I mean, that's a big fail on the part of industry. And what we did a few years ago is we decided to step back and do some research. So we did some really robust research to determine what are the driving factors, not only that makes a successful flight school or a successful flight training experience, where are we failing? Where's that failure point? And so we talked to a lot of really good flight schools. There's lots of pockets of excellence out there. We talked to some not-so-great flight schools and found out what they were doing. We've gone to industry leaders. I mean, the platinum standard for training is John and Martha King. They're here in the front of the audience here, and they're one of the group folks that we talked to. And long story short, after almost 2 years of research, we came up with our flight training initiative, and it's based on the driving factors that we found of not only what causes a student to drop out, but what causes a student to succeed. And we developed all sorts of resources and materials for flight schools, for students, and for CFIs, resources based on the principles that we found in the research to move the needle and get folks not only through the door, but to pilot certification, and to build on programs like Young Eagles, where you capture the hearts and minds of these folks really young, but we don't necessarily keep them because they have a bad flight training experience. And so I'm really, really jazzed about this. It's exciting. We're literally in the launch mode in terms of an ambassador program and a whole bunch of other things that we're doing to support flight training. And one of the things that we announced this week is we now offer financing for any pilot that wants to learn to fly, up to $100,000 at a low interest rate, lower than what you can get on the market, and terms that are real easy to get, from anywhere from 24 to 84 months. And so that's just another resource that we want to put out there for folks that want to learn to fly and support them. And it's a really exciting time to be a part of this initiative. And if you want more information on it, just go to our website, aopa.org, and we have a flight training initiative page with all sorts of information about how you can get involved.
That's great. That's super effort, and that's exactly where we need to be focusing, get the young people in here. Greg, I was wondering, I know we've talked about it, and we have a concern, in our organization with state aviation officials and state aviation departments, and the reduction in resources and personnel that are being put in there. And if you could expand on that, I think it would be helpful.
Yeah, happy to do that. As I alluded to before, our members of the 50 state departments of aviation, which is a little bit of a misnomer. You have some states, like I said before, like Alaska and Hawaii. Alaska, the state runs over 250 airports of all sizes in all parts of that state. In Hawaii, they run all the airports in that state. In Maryland, they run BWI Airport. In Connecticut, they run the airport in Hartford. The fellow who's the airport director in Providence, Rhode Island, Medium Hub Airport, told me that when he got the job as the director of the airport, which is the job he thought he was applying for, he also found out, oh, by the way, you're also the state aviation director. So you have that. And then you have some states, there's a northeastern state I won't name, but I may have lived a chunk of my life there, that 10 years ago had 30 people in the aviation department, did a lot of work. They have a lot of airports through the state. They had a commissioner of transportation who came in 10 years ago and said, we have the FAA, what do we need you guys for? We're cutting budgets, and so now they have 3 people. And then obviously you have departments around the country, aviation departments. 43 of the 50 are part of some bigger organization. The transportation department, which most people see as the highway department. In only 7 states do you have a separate aviation department in Virginia, where I live now, happens to be one of them. In some states, the aviation department is seen by the legislators and the press and the public as, well, those are the folks who just fly the governor around. And why does the governor have a plane anyway? And then it gets into all that kind of nonsense. As you know, Matt talked about before, you know, all these different issues came up. The joke you told at the beginning about some legislators going to call about the noise. The folks in communities around the country who see aviation either as a problem, you know, whether it's noise or any of those other kind of things, who have some kind of complaint, oftentimes before it really reaches the ears of those of us in Washington and, you know, people at that kind of level, it's the folks in my membership who are really fighting those battles on a day-in, day-out basis with the legislator, with the governor's office, with the local and state press, talking to them about the importance of aviation, the economic importance of aviation. And by the way, shout out to both Ed Bolin and Pete Bunce up here, who I think really have seen over the years the need to better tell the story of the economic importance of aviation and have taken some real steps in that direction, which I know I can tell you from my members' point of view is very, very helpful in making that case to the, as one of my old bosses used to call it, the 3P audience, the press, the public, and the politicians, all of whom have a great deal to say about where aviation policy goes in this country, where the state of aviation goes in this country, and very few of whom ever really take the time to learn what the industry is really all about. One of the first things I did when I took this job is I picked up the phone, called all 50 directors of aviation in the states, and I can tell you I haven't found one whose budget's going up. I haven't found one. I was talking to my chair one day on the phone. We had a scheduled conference call, and she said, my governor just proposed a 50% cut in my budget, got to go. So we didn't talk that day. And she's beaten that back, and a lot of times when people are looking at budgets, there are a couple of places they look, well, you know, this is easy money, we can just cut this, cut that, and oftentimes the aviation program is seen that way, especially, like I said, if the press and the legislators just think it's the folks who fly the governor around and so forth. So, you know, but at the end of the day, they're really at the front lines fighting those battles to keep those airports open, to keep a system in this country that works well for all of you and for the entire aviation community. And one of our missions at NASAO, and working with my colleagues up here, and I have to say AOPA and NBAA do a great job working with us around the country. I know HAI does as well in making the case in the legislatures for sensible policies and so forth, helping us look out for problems as they develop. But really, one of my priorities is to give my members even better tools to be able to make those arguments back to the press, public, and politicians when those things come up, especially with all the budget cuts and everything else that's going on.
Thanks a lot. Well, I'll give an update on where we're at with HAI, and then we'll get into some questions. But in essence, we're doing well as an organization, financially very healthy. The show is performing, you know, beyond our expectations, and I think this recent show is an example of that. We're looking at about 21,000 people to attend, 1 million square feet, and about 60 helicopters out there, and 750 exhibitors, and that's all a function and a result of your support, which we really appreciate. We've been in our new headquarters about 1.5 years, and I like to mention that because it's a members' headquarters, and we like to remind people that our conference facilities and our training facilities, and we have visitors' offices, and you're more welcome as an HAI member to use those and our affiliated groups, and there's no cost to you, and we love visitors. In staffing, we are in the process right now of recruiting some key staff positions, and I like to keep pointing out what they are because I don't think you can get a better pool of potential applicants than an Heli Expo. So we are looking for a director for our foundation, the Helicopter Foundation International. We're looking for a vice president of operations, and we're looking for a director of safety, all key and important positions to us. And if you or someone that you know is interested, please let us know. In terms of issues that we're dealing with, pretty much we have a commonality, obviously, with the other associations and jointly work on those. We do address The issue of safety is priority number one, as always. I think if you take even a brief look at the schedule for Heli Expo, you will clearly see that safety is the focus and absorbs the most resources that we have and offers the most opportunities. We did develop our Land and Live program, which is moving forward very nicely and it being accepted and implemented in the community. And the very essence of that program is quite simple. As we looked at accident sequencing, we found out that we run around as an industry internationally, and we promote the fact that we can land anywhere we want, and we do it every day for a living. We land on buildings, boats, piers, people's front lawns, anywhere, accident scenes. Now, when it comes to the necessity that we should be making the landing in situations of rapidly deteriorating weather that ultimately lead to inadvertent IMC accidents and fatalities, when we have fuel situations, we are still running out of fuel, and when we have mechanical irregularities that show up, we're not addressing them aggressively. And the one simple act that we can do to stop all the accidents from those events is land the helicopter. It's as simple as that. It's a psychological issue. It's obviously not an operational or logistical issue. The helicopter can be landed anywhere that you're over. So it's really a human factors decision-making risk assessment issue that we're struggling with very hard as to why the pilots just don't land the aircraft when they encounter these situations. And the good news to that is that it's now being accepted and implemented into policies at flight schools to teach the new pilots this is an option, that you should not be focused on completion of mission or your destination. It's not important. The other thing is the companies are actually highlighting it by taking collateral material and putting it into the training programs, and some people have actually taken little decals and put them in the aircraft. Remember to land and live. So we're pretty excited about that. Unmanned vehicles, we actually believe that the helicopter industry will be ultimately the largest operator of small UAVs in the low altitude structures performing utility type or other related missions for the customer base. And we already have taken a serious look at this, and we've identified quite a few missions that will be performed or supplement current helicopter operations in our industry. And just some of the examples of that would be aerial application, filming, electronic news gathering, the inspection of properties and infrastructure with UAVs. And one of the examples we just got about that is offshore. The offshore industry had people with equipment inspecting oil platforms. They now are experimenting and doing it with UAVs, with the equipment on the UAV. And they're finding that the performance level and results of that are extremely high. The other one is the power line utility patrol. There's a number of projects that are now going on where power lines are being inspected and patrolled with unmanned vehicles. So we realize that that's coming forward, and we're trying to position ourselves to develop that skill and talent with the specific vehicle. We already know how to operate in the vertical lift capability area. We already know what it's like to operate at low altitude environments, and we're doing these missions now with helicopters. So common sense tells us that this is a whole new area in the industry that is going to be in our future, and we're looking forward to it. Like everyone else sitting up here, we absolutely want to make sure it's done safely and efficiently, and that the proper regulations and training are put in place so that that environment is created, that we don't have any undue risk to any of the stakeholders that are in the airspace. The other issue that we have is a shortage of pilots and mechanics, which continues. It has continued for a couple of years now, and we're really starting to notice the inability to get experienced maintenance people and pilots to perform the missions. We're doing everything we can to try to get that pipeline going from both sources that we have available to us, obviously the civilian source and the military source. We have started an aggressive program of training the military people in workshops that we put on for them that gives them the proper protocols, procedures, and thought processes to how to transition from the military to the civilian. That's valuable talent and experience that's coming out of the military that we desperately need in both maintenance and pilots. We're doing the same thing with the civilian end of this by having career days, mentoring, and which are going on at Heli Expo and we do on the road as well, to try to help the young people get a better understanding. The other thing we really looked at is right now the normal pro forma for a young person coming in is to really have to come up with financing, and that's why I'm so excited about that program. The ability to raise $80,000 for a young person that wants to be a CFI and then move into the industry is a pretty tough burden. And we looked at it and we realized that you come in, you spend that money, you get your CFI license, you now have to spend X years, whatever that might be, to build up to about 1,000 to 1,500 hours, which in our world makes you marketable to the commercial world. And in essence, also some turbine time. That's a pretty hard task for these young people to go down that road alone. So we're looking at the efficacy of actually rethinking the concept and philosophy. Do we really need to have pigeonholes where, okay, do you have 1,000 hours? Do you have an IFR ticket? Have you had some turbine time? Have you flown this mission? There's a better way to do this. There's no reason why we can't get pilots at a 500-hour pilot level to do the basic entry missions in our industry. An example I would use would be air tours. Air tours is about the most stable operating environment with consistency to it, which is a great area for these young pilots to get into that area and see if we can't bring down, you know, that level. I think that's something that's achievable, and we can maintain the same status safety-wise if we just change the way we do business and do it the right way. So that's something we're certainly working on. The other one that's really been quite a serious problem for us is noise, and noise abatement and community relations. And I think there's kind of a watershed moment here that we're facing right now, to be honest. And the best example I use is the New York City metro area. A number of years ago, about 2-3 years ago, there was an initiative that the FAA put through to create restricted routes and altitudes for helicopters based on nothing more than noise complaints from constituents to elected officials. And the reality was there was no studies done, no analysis. It was strictly somebody's complaining and I want something done. And I'll give the FAA credit. They do not think that regulatory initiative is the way to solve the noise problem. But that being said, Washington is Washington, and the elected officials, through political pressure, forced them to do these regulations. That was only the tip of the iceberg. The rest of it is to shut down the airspace around the New York metro area. And the mayor of New York right now is taking under consideration presentations that the industry made to him and presentations that the community made to him, reference to continuing air tour operations out of the city heliports in Manhattan. There's about 110,000 operations that occur with helicopters on an annual basis at the heliports. Air tours represents almost 55% of that activity. The other factor, which is the city's number, not ours, that they contribute $30 million in revenue to the city of New York. Because of the political pressure, both from within his own party and the communities, Mayor de Blasio is actually deciding whether to continue air tours in the city of New York or not, knowing that it contributes $30 million. And you can see what the comparison is there for a mayor to be considering giving up $30 million of revenue because of political pressure. And that's not normally something that they do easily. The result of that cancellation of air tours will affect probably 45 to 50 helicopters and hundreds of people. It will also put the death knell into the heliport that they operate from because there's no longer a business case. You can't remove all your business and then survive as a heliport. Common sense. New Jersey just passed legislation, and it's in the initial stages moving forward, that no heliport that's certified by the state of New Jersey, DOT, will be allowed to conduct any air tours from it. Airports in the state of New Jersey are going to be mandated to reduce their helicopter traffic by 47%. That is serious stuff. So that are issues that we are really concerned about quite a bit. The other one is the next-gen issue. Obviously, we support next-gen, we support ADSB, and we are always working for the last at least 8 years now, putting resources and a lot of effort into developing a low en-route IFR structure for helicopters to allow us to conduct a seamless transition between VFR to IFR. And that is something that has been a very important program from us. But I'd like to go back just for 2 more questions, and then we'll get questions from the audience. Ed, you're familiar and somewhat involved in the situation at East Hampton, and that is going to affect your members as well. The new regulations that were written at East Hampton Airport actually say that helicopters pretty much can't go there between Friday and Monday, which is the prime business during the summer season to operate at that airport. And I know there's effects also on your members, so if your thoughts on that.
Well, at East Hampton and at other airports around the country, there continues to be pressure from local communities that potentially can threaten the long-term viability of the airport. At East Hampton, the pressure point is a lot more immediate. We're looking at council meeting on Friday to consider some of the things that Matt has talked about. We are concerned about the potential for a local airport to propose effectively banning or eliminating an entire category of aircraft. And so we've been involved, as has Matt, meeting with the local officials, meeting with the attorneys and others to try to go back to some of the founding principles that we have to make sure that what is done is fair, it's not arbitrary, and it's something that has been recognized. And so a lot of concerns have been raised about East Hampton. It's one of the many airports in the United States that is under pressure, and I mentioned earlier, protecting our access to airports and to airspace is kind of fundamental to the future of our industry. The reason people use general aviation aircraft is because they want to go specific places at certain times, and they want to do it efficiently, predictably, and affordably. And so our ability to address these issues effectively is really important. It's one of the reasons that we spend so much time together, look at what's the law, what's the policy, what's the process, and try to the greatest extent possible, preserve and enhance our access. And East Hampton is a clear threat.
Yeah, thanks. And then to close out the questions to the panel, Melissa, we obviously are all interested in ADSB, and that mandatory compliance is approaching. And I was wondering the thoughts that AOPA had on that initiative.
So yes, first of all, AOPA obviously supports NextGen and ADSB. We were one of the industry leaders in the early 90s in the whole GPS movement, so it's a wonderful technology. The challenge that we have as we come down to the wire on implementation of the mandate is that we have a large segment of our members who are choosing not to equip at this time, that feel that the price point's too high given the type of equipment that they fly. Their hull values of $25,000, $30,000. And so we also believe that in order for NextGen to be successful, we need to have high levels of equipage. We don't want people left out in the cold or people not to equip and then just avoid the rural airspace, because the long-term health and viability of NextGen requires, in our opinion, or in our research, that as many users as possible equipped, just like what happened with transponders. And so we had, the FAA late last year recognized that not only was there a cost issue for GA, there were other barriers that could potentially derail ADS-B implementation across all segments of industry, helicopters, military, airlines, and they convened a summit. And so all the associations were there. I called it the airing of the grievances. Everybody stood up and talked about what their barriers were. The FAA went back and developed an initiative called Equip 2020. We all participate in it. There are working groups dealing with breaking down these barriers and moving forward. We serve on the GA working group along with Gamma and others. And I think because of that effort, because we had some really robust discussions, we are seeing some movement in the market. L3 announced a lower cost alternative. We think it's a good start. Pete alluded to the fact that there's other manufacturers poised to help drive that price point down and introduce lower cost alternatives into the market. And we're hoping that that spurs equipage sooner rather than later, and that we can move forward and meet the 2020 mandate.
Thanks a lot. So now what we'd like to do is to open up the floor for any questions, which we're very anxious to hear your thoughts or ideas and questions. We do have mics set up, and it would really be helpful if you could step up to that mic and ask the question, because we can get it recorded and we can hear it and the audience can hear it. So anybody like to ask any questions, please do so. Yeah, please.
Hi, I live in Miami Beach, and the theory of taking a helicopter from Miami Beach or Brickell, which is downtown Miami, to one of the private airports has come up quite a lot. And the question would be whether an Uber service or private air taxi service might function well in a place like Miami.
Well, I'm sorry, I just didn't catch the end of that about the air taxi service. And
well, how it might function as far as a commercial venture, flying in and out of the private airports, Opa-locka and Tamiami and Miami, to the major core of where people live, Miami Beach and Brickell and some of the other outlying areas.
And maybe I'm missing it. I couldn't hear.
An Uber of the air or something like
Yeah,
that?
kind of an Uber air taxi service or some way to move people around. There's a building going up in Brickell by architect Zaha Hadid. She's putting a heliport on top of a 50-story building. So the movement, I think, in Miami is that people are willing to engage in certain activities, and air taxi service might be one of them. And I live on the beach. I'm a physician. I'm also an FAA AME. So I get to see different things from different perspectives, but I think this is one of the things that has come up.
So it's basically the restrictions and opposition that you're receiving?
It's just at the very beginning stages. But I just wanted to open to the panel what that thought process was, and if there was any merit to such an adventure.
I would just say I think there's merit in any of those ideas.
Yeah.
I think the regulatory hurdle is still out there. On the fixed wing side, there was an initiative to be able to start a real, on the Uber concept, to be able to use aircraft that were deadheading on one of the legs, and to be able to set that up. And my colleagues may be more familiar with it, but the FAA kind of shut that down on them, and now there's a legal process going in the courts to be able to gin that back up. So I think there are some regulatory hurdles to it. I'm not all that.
Certainly on the Uber service, the FAA felt it crossed the line from a private venture to into the commercial or chartered territory with folks that were not flying under Part 135. But I think if you're asking about the feasibility of helicopter operations, I think you can look to New York as an example of all the hurdles that occur with a big city.
I mean, I understand the feasibility of it, the thought process that goes into it, and I think the deficiencies that I see when people do that is that there's not enough planning, not enough homework. And if you do the homework and you do these studies and you due diligence and you identify, obviously the business plan is what the benefits are to do it and what comes to you on your return on your investment. But the part that seems to get lost a little is what are the oppositions or the challenges that you might have in the project. And the good news is you can plan around those if you address them properly. And I think that's one of the things we have in the industry, that when we go on these ventures or even ongoing operations, is that we don't take seriously what the noise impact is. We don't take seriously what the safety history of our industry is, and the ultimate effect on somebody like you that wants to, put forth that venture. When you walk in and propose it, the community is basically the toughest people you got to deal with, and they need to be convinced that you're safe, you're not going to impact the environment around them, and that you're adding value to the community. And that's pretty much the basic formula. But I mean, I would encourage anybody to consider and start a venture, and as long as you do the homework and due diligence. Yeah.
Yeah, I think what the question gets to is per seat charter. And I think there are ways that it can be done. I think there are people who are trying to execute on that concept and prove its validity. There are challenges with the FAA and the DOT regulations related to a scheduled airline holding out for compensation to hire. There are a lot of issues that get into that and have created some questions within the fixed wing world. But I think there are a lot of opportunities to use technology to make general aviation available to more and more people, and I think those business models are starting to surface. Some have technical challenges, some have financial challenges, but the idea has been out there for a while, and there are people executing against the idea, and I think people are figuring it out.
Yeah, and there actually are operations running right now that sell seats, in essence, rather than aircraft. And the cross line to that is there's a denotation in the regulations as to when you're going to cross over into the requirements for a scheduled air carrier. And it involves things like fixed routes, set times, publication of those routes and timetables. But it's pretty well defined as to when you're going to be a scheduled airline versus, somebody selling, seats on an aircraft that's going on a charter. Anyone else? About anything? The organizations, the issues we talk about? Okay.
There you go.
First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for being here. I think from the helicopter community, a lot of folks feel that from what I see on the floor and stuff is that the fixed wing community, the helicopter community seem very separate. But in reality, we have many aspects that go together with both sides. But I just thought maybe you could just kind of have just a little bit of discussion about, how, I know like Pete, your Gamma specifically is working with the manufacturers and stuff. And I know you've had very strong fixed wing OEM support, and I know the helicopter community is just now starting to come in and to be part of that, but maybe some of the others can kind of talk about the integration between the fixed wing community and the helicopter community and how we help each other in some of those issues.
Sure.
Well, Tony, it's always good to get a question from a former chairman, too. It's been interesting through my time, I'm going on a decade now at Gamma, on how effectively I think we have been able as associations to take one association usually takes the leadership of a specific issue, and the other associations come in as wingmen. And I'll take the issue that Matt was just talking about. Noise is a big issue, and especially if you're talking about certain routes, or you're talking about the National Park Service and some of the new initiatives that they have moving forward. In fact, I think there's a whole day forum on that right now. We're doing whatever we can from providing data and everything to HAI, and Ed works that on his part, and we have a lot of airport issues that Greg gets involved in. And so each one of us have an issue. If you take third class medical, it's across the board. It affects all of our manufacturing customers, but it affects fixed wing and rotorcraft. We let AOPA and EAA effectively, there are flight leads on it, and everybody else folds in. I think the thing that's fascinating in the rotorcraft world now is, especially if you look at what Augusta is doing and what Bell has done with the V-22, but also in their next development on the military side, is that line between what is a turboprop now and what is a vertical lift aircraft that transitions into basically a turboprop. And that's where we've really got to work the regulatory piece of that. I always use Matt's example of technology now. If we've got the technology to allow us to fly GPS-based approaches, we know we can do it safely. And you have an emergency situation where an EMS unit has to get into a vehicle crash site. Usually the weather's bad, that's when we have crashes. The fact that there's this concept out there by some of the regulators that you can't fly an electronically manufactured approach and do it safely because you haven't been able to flight test it is just, it's the perfect being the enemy of the good. We'll save so many more lives by using technology there, but if we make it too expensive or we just say, well, we can't do it because we can't have 10 to the minus 9 safety, we're going to lose more lives in that process. And so that's where I think all of us have this vested interest to watch the rotorcraft community and the fixed-wing community do that merging as you're talking about, because so many of the systems are common and so many of our challenges. When Matt talks about mechanics and air crews, it's across the board on the fixed-wing side as well. So we all share those challenges.
And I'd like to follow up, Tony, because, you know, I think you pointed out what is very obvious to a lot of people in the general aviation community. For people in the general aviation community, when we have that clear granularity about what our industry is, we can see kind of bright line distinctions, fixed wing, rotor ring, piston, turbine, 91, 30, 135. There are lots of ways that we could slice, dice, chop, and divide our industry. But the reality is, as you move further back, this is general aviation. People who are not in general aviation, who are not in aviation, they see the commercial airlines, they see military aviation, and then they see everything else. And by definition, that's us. And so there are a lot of big issues that impact all of us. And the challenge that we have is recognizing that we are all inextricably linked to each other. We're all part of a broader community. And things like certification, things like access to airports and airspace, things like tax policy, things like understanding the economic impact of our industry, attracting young people. These are things that we're all in this together. And so we can find ways to divide ourselves. We can define ways to make it somebody else's problem. But the reality is we're all in this together. And we all need to be working together. And I think that that has been a conscious effort of the board of directors of every one of the associations that you see here. And I think it's a personal commitment of all of the presidents to find ways that we as a community can work together to address the big issues that impact everybody, recognizing that there are some concerns that may be more immediate for one segment than the other. As Pete talked about, there are organizations that naturally take the point, but we are each other's wingmen. We do coordinate, we do communicate, and we do support each other because we recognize the overall health of one segment is ultimately going to impact everybody else. And that starts within the general aviation community. Frankly, it expands out beyond that. The entire aviation community needs to work together. But where we can directly impact it most is at the closest level to the ground, at the grassroots level, and get all of the general aviation organizations talking together, coordinating and communicating. And I think we've made a lot of progress there.
Yeah, if I can follow up on that, I totally agree, and I accept the premise of your question. But in the quarter century or so I've been immersed in this, Ed's very much right. When people from the outside look at it, they think aviation, they think of American Airlines, United, they think of LAX and, you know, JFK and all the rest of it. They don't really see all of it. And one of the things I've noticed over the 25 years that I've been immersed in it, I've worked in it before more tangentially, is that is the change Ed's talked about, where what was happening inside the industry was, there was a certain siloed effect, and people sort of fought their own corner and fought with each other. Maybe enjoyed having a drink with one another after work, but still sort of fought their own corner. And now there's a greater effort, and I said the organizations represented up here really are in the forefront of this, a greater effort to come together, not only present a united front, because there are always people, one of the things in Washington and in state capitals, when you're talking about, and in city councils, when you're talking about policy and getting those things together, the folks that want to do you harm want to keep you apart. The best way to get something done is to isolate somebody. And the less we allow that to happen, the better off we're going to be. And that's one of the biggest changes I've seen over the 25 years I've been involved in aviation in a really immersed kind of way, that we really have come together. We figured that out. And we may not agree on everything. We're going to meet, privately on this issue or that, and disagree, maybe even argue a little bit about something. But when we come together and move forward, and really, so the general public and the press likes to think about the big airplanes and the big airports and all that, but we've really worked, I think, as a general aviation community. What I saw from the commercial side for all those years is that the commercial side and the general aviation side now are communicating much better with each other, and I think that's a very positive thing as well.
Yeah, I think the other thing is that people are not aware of how much we do work together, and I know that on an average in a given month, there's 1 or 2 letters that'll go up on the Hill, and all of our signatures are on that letter. That's really the highest level of coordination and cooperation, is that we all support each other when each one of us needs, that support as a collective group. We deal with things and going up on the Hill to lobby and affect legislation in terms of informational training, type sessions that will all be there, and update the elected officials and the staff on something that's common to general aviation. Our user fees, we were all together on that. Low lead fuel, we all have members who have, piston engines that are going to be affected by it. I think the other thing that a lot of people don't realize is how much of a dual membership that members of the general aviation community have in multiple, organizations. On a personal level, I'm a member of most of these organizations, and I know that I've been a member for AOPA, 30, 40 years. I know that Mark Baker is a helicopter owner and pilot. I know that the other people have shared in those activities as well. We go to EAA, and we have the new heli center, and EAA has been just phenomenal supporting that concept to integrate and draw in more helicopters. President Oshkosh, and the interface is really quite nice to see the fixed wing community, mixing with the helicopter community, and that it goes on a day-to-day basis, truly. And even in our worst times, it's been the most valuable. And the classic example I could use to that is the tragic accident they had in New York with a fixed wing and an air tour helicopter. The cooperative level between AOPA and HAI at that time was the highest I've ever seen. And we both served on the working groups that were able to navigate us through that mess and maintain a reasonable access to the airspace. I really believe if that cooperation had not been present, that airspace would have been shut down to both of us, and we all would have been in trouble. So, that's really where it pays off when we have to deal with some of the toughest situations out there. So I'm just thrilled that it exists, and I have the opportunity to work with these people.
One of my executive directors showed up at our fall board meeting flying his R-66 and parked it outside the museum at Oshkosh. So he was taking delivery of it, flying it back to the East Coast. So there is a lot of helicopter voices at the table.
I would just add what I think is a very daunting thought is, we talked about what's commercial aviation, what's military aviation, what's general aviation, but the UASs are going to be part of us. And so it's incumbent upon all of us to be able to speak with a unified voice back toward the FAA and respond to the NPRM, because this is where they're going to operate first, is down in the airspace where rotorcraft and light fixed wing fly. But the other interesting thing is the way the FAA set up the structure is their thought was always, I think it's AFS 80 that is the Jim Williams, the one that promulgates the rules. The thought was that will always be part of AFS 800, which is general aviation. So even in their long-range thinking several years ago when the FAA set that up, they still intended that that would eventually come back under the general aviation fold once they got all the rules out. So we've got a lot of work ahead of us.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, good morning. Ron Donner with AMT Magazine. I want to talk just a little bit about maintenance, and I've probably talked to every one of you on the panel a time or two about it, but not so much a question more than maybe just some of my observations more recently. But of course, as it's no big surprise, aircraft maintenance as a profession in some of the segments of our wonderful industry has lost some appeal to get into, and we all know that and recognize that. And there's, I believe, a lot of reasons that go into whether it's stability, wages. Certainly, people like us had a passion when we got involved with aviation that maybe isn't there. But one of the more alarming things that I've come upon recently, and Melissa mentioned the 70%, I think, kind of dropout rate for new pilot starts, if I understood that correctly. At any given time, there's 20 to 40% graduates from our Part 147 A&P schools that go into other industries immediately. And being in Orlando, we should also recognize that there are cases recorded of the amusement park industry hiring complete graduating classes, whether they have an A&P or not. So I just think it's important to encourage your members continually on these sort of aspects that are, that are out there. And any discussion you want to have on it is fine. And of course, I do always want to point out that one of the greatest initiatives, I believe, about encouraging young people is the Kid Venture Jack. So yeah, I always make it there every year.
I think your issue on the A&P is us. We need to attack it from the other side. Back in my prior days at Cessna, we were struggling with getting A&Ps in our service centers. And we put an on-purpose campaign. Now, I know this, I don't want this to start a war between what's more important from a career standpoint, but we went out and actually went to educators. So you got this person teaching in a school system, making in the Wichita case, it's $30,000 a year approximately. We could put them through a 2-year program, double their salary, put them to work in a service center in an air-conditioned environment with a pretty strong career path. And I'll tell you, we did a very, very good job of filling our service centers by doing what the amusement parks have done to the A&P classes here in Orlando in reverse. So we just got to get our head around as to where's the market, who do we need to go after. Got well-educated people who come in and do a great job for us.
Okay.
Can I just real quick?
Go ahead.
Just on your underlying point about where graduates are coming from and where they're going and all that. Next week, I'm actually moderating a panel at a very different kind of conference, Airport Revenue News, on that similar topic, succession planning, they're calling it. But in so many industries, certainly the airport side, you just talked about this, and so many other industries throughout our economy, the places you always used to get people, there was a path. You graduated from a certain school, you got a certain certification, you got a certain job, you did this. And now you're getting people from totally different places than you got them from before. You're competing against different kinds of industries and companies to get them, and then you're losing them to places you didn't lose. You used to lose them to a competitor maybe, now you're losing them to some industry that didn't exist 5 years ago. And this is an underlying topic I think a lot of people in aviation are trying to get their arms around.
Just to add to that, I hear a lot of comments, as I'm sure I do, about, we grew up fixing motorcycles and lawnmowers and cars, and that's how we became mechanics, correct? And that young people today aren't doing that. They aren't. and they're with their smartphone, they're gaming on the computers, they're doing all these things that are not technical skills. But I also offer that, look at any instrument panel on an airplane today. Look at the seat back in an airliner, and what are those units you're looking at? No different than the computer screens that the youngsters are playing with today. And I think as a group, sometimes we discount some of those youngsters because they're, quote, not, mechanical, if you will. And my point is, those are the people we should be encouraging to maintain, to install all this equipment that's in, Pete's member companies that are coming out. There's, how much different is there between the instrument panel of the Cirrus or the Bell or the seat back in the airliner to what young people today are normally involved in their game playing and so on.
Good points. Yes, sir, and we'll have to make this one the last question because we are over time.
Well, I'm not smart enough to make it a question. I just wanted to say thank you, folks, very much for being here. We wouldn't have general aviation as we know it today if it weren't for you folks up on the stage. My wife and I have been fortunate enough to travel by general aviation airplane in 6 of the 7 continents, and there is no system like ours in the rest of the world. I guess that's what happens when you can't hold a heading. But there's no place in the world that has the access to general aviation that we have in the United States, and it's due to your efforts. In other parts of the world, if they want to put it in a restricted area, they put it in a restricted area. In the United States, they collaborate with you folks to make sure that it's acceptable and workable. So thank you very, very much for being here. We wouldn't have GA as we know it today without you, and I appreciate very much your being here. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Thanks for your very generous comments. Well, with that, we'll close out the session. And again, I really want to thank you for being here and joining us. And absolutely am thrilled that my associates were able to make it down and join us and participate in this. And again, it just shows their commitment to the joint membership that we share and also the industry itself. And thanks a lot. I appreciate it. Thank you. And now you have a beautiful show to go participate in. Enjoy.